Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was created in the AITAH subreddit by a throwaway account. The post is titled AITAH for calling my father's wife a creep. I am 32F. My father is in his 60s and has been married to Sasha, who is in her 40s, for almost a decade. I was already an adult when they started seeing each other, so I never had much of a relationship with her. That said, Sasha was nice and thoughtful, though a bit annoying at times, and I never had any problems with her. I now have a husband, 34M, and 2 kids, 9M and 4F. Sasha is very fond of my children, especially my daughter. That became very suffocating pretty quickly, so we started setting some boundaries. She never overstepped them. In January, my father and Sasha decided to go on a trip to Disney World and invited us to join them. We decided to go to celebrate our son's 9th birthday. I quickly regretted coming along. Sasha spent the entire trip fussing over my daughter in ways that overstepped almost every boundary we'd set. Examples include Sasha buying a mini ears tiara. She wanted me to buy my daughter an identical one so they could match. My daughter didn't like the tiara, so I bought her a Donald Duck hat instead. Sasha got her the tiara anyway and was upset that she didn't want to wear it. My father and Sasha went shopping in between parks. I told them not to buy my kids anything, as we still had shopping to do and didn't want to risk making our bags too heavy. Still, Sasha returned with 5 bags of clothing for my daughter and 2 for my son, saying she couldn't resist it. My daughter wanted a Belle costume to wear at the parks, as that's her favorite princess. Sasha tried to convince us to get her an Ariel costume instead because that's her favorite. I explained that we never watched The Little Mermaid at home because my daughter is scared of Ursula. Sasha insisted on taking dozens of pictures with my daughter in front of the castle at Magic Kingdom. She also took some with my son, but not nearly as many. She tried to convince us to take our daughter to Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. We refused because the prices are crazy and we'd already bought her the Belle costume. She offered to pay, but we held our ground. I later found out Sasha tried to make a reservation anyway, but there was no availability. When we took our daughter to Slinky Dog Dash, her first roller coaster, Sasha tried to sit next to her. My daughter wanted to sit with me, so we switched. She tried to do the same thing in other attractions. At the Muppets Theater, she tried to get my daughter to sit in her lap. Sasha also tried to pick her up while we met some of the characters. There were more instances. The final straw for me, however, was the last park day of the trip. We were at Magic Kingdom. My husband suffered a minor injury and I had to take him to the first aid station. The kids wanted to go to the Peter Pan ride, so my dad and Sasha offered to take them in the meantime. However, according to my father, the line was too long, so instead, Sasha suggested the Little Mermaid ride, assuring my kids Ursula wasn't on it. Actually, there's a pretty big Ursula animatronic there. My daughter was still sobbing and hugging her brother when we reunited. When we flew back home, I told my father that we'd no longer take our children on trips with Sasha due to her behavior. He got extremely angry. He said his wife loved my kids, thought about what they'd like to do at every moment of the trip, and that we should be grateful to have her in our lives. I lost my temper at that. I told him Sasha was a creep and that they should be grateful I was still okay with them even seeing my children after her actions during the trip. We ended up having a huge fight after that. It's been weeks since we returned home and my father is still angry at me and my husband. Sasha has texted me a few times. She says she's sorry if she made me uncomfortable, but that she loves my kids and hoped to use the trip to spend more time with them. To be honest, I don't think I'm the jerk here, but I do think I might have overreacted. I believe there's a chance Sasha's actions were motivated by love and she truly did have good intentions. User Significant Cat 3 said NTA, you set some pretty clear boundaries that Sasha kept crossing the entire trip. Even your daughter seems to not be particularly receptive towards her. Also, your son can probably pick up on this favoritism, and that's not good for him either. I don't mean to do armchair psychology, but this reads like Sasha has always wanted a young daughter and is using yours to live vicariously through. Hence why she kept trying to push things that your daughter doesn't like onto her. Under this comment, OP said, my son doesn't like Sasha. I'm not sure why, but I think he gets that she favors my daughter. He's also very protective of his sister, so her discomfort could also be a reason. User 50 Cent But in Nichols said, where did she show even an ounce of caring what they wanted to do? Was it when she tried to force a tiara and an Ariel costume on them, or maybe when she lied to terrorize them? She's the worst kind of Disney adult. User DoxinMom5 said, she's playing dress up and using your daughter as her child. It's Sasha's make-believe. Your daughter is not a toy or a prop. You aren't the jerk, but she knew your daughter was afraid of Ursula and terrified her anyway. Your dad is lying to your face and stomping all over you. How healthy is this? User Pick a Better Name said, you're NTA because you have your children's best interests at heart, but it may benefit you and your dad's relationship to understand why Sasha is like she is. Overstepping boundaries is easier for someone when they believe it's for a good cause or to have fun in a safe way. Does she have kids of her own? Can she not have kids of her own? Does she maybe see the kids as her grandkids? It's a difficult one, but getting to the source of that could make the whole thing healthier. But on the other hand, it's not your job to put that work in when it's your father's relationship. All I'd suggest you do is explain to your father that you set boundaries and regardless of intention, Sasha broke them, which you do not condone. Good luck. Under this comment, OP said the following: Sasha doesn't have children of her own. My father has me and my sister and has always been open about not wanting more kids. They're married, so I'm assuming she doesn't want kids either. I also don't think she sees my kids as grandchildren. She's always referred to herself as Aunt Sasha instead. When I got pregnant with my son, she commented she was too young to be a grandma. User Divinitry said, when blended or even regular families get together this close, friction is literally inevitable. Disneyland by itself can make people more excited than usual, and then we, the parents and especially grandparents, focus on the children experiencing our excitement through them. My feeling is that your father's wife meant well but got carried away by the Disney experience. You had only so many days and hours to experience it. Plus, there is the generational difference where not too long ago, anything a child got from Disney was very special, and gratitude was assured. All that has changed, and some grandma types haven't caught on to that yet. My suggestion is to just not do such trips anymore since your preferences greatly differ. Your father's wife, and he clearly cares for her, wants to be a good grandma to his grandchildren, but likely went overboard. It's one of those times where when you can forgive and let go, it will go a long way. Getting older, being a grandma, and interacting with your spouse's adult children isn't as intuitive as with one's own children. Just take the high road and be glad your father has a spouse who's trying her best to fit in. It could be very different, trust me. About a week later, OP provided an update. I read your comments and came to the following conclusion. As much as Sasha's behavior towards my children angered me and freaked me out, calling her a creep was the wrong reaction to have. That said, I think it's best for my family to distance itself from Sasha for the time being, and at the very least, my previous decision to avoid future trips with her based on the Disney trip is still the best course of action. Sasha's pushiness, tendency to override my and my husband's parenting, and blatant favoritism towards my daughter were much worse when the kids were younger. After my daughter's birth, she began to focus too much attention on her and almost none on my son. I gave more examples of that in the comments on my original post. That's the reason we set boundaries in the first place. Her fixation on my daughter also bothers me. When we had the boundary conversation with my father and Sasha, she told us that she'd always wondered what having a daughter would be like. She'd also defined herself as child-free before, so I was never certain what to think of that. Either way, that reassured me and my husband that we were doing the best for our kids. Those boundaries had never been overstepped. Then we went on the Disney trip and most of them were completely ignored. Many of you pointed out that she might have gotten carried away or that Disney is exciting and she wanted to make sure my kids had the best experience, etc. There are two things I'll say to that. The first is that whatever Sasha's reasons were, she still overstepped our boundaries. When we first set those, we told her that doing so would have consequences. Disney or not, I don't see a reason to make an exception. Secondly, she wasn't trying to ensure my kids had the best experience. She was pushing them to fulfill her fantasy of what their Disney trip should look like. She repeatedly ignored my children's wishes in favor of her own, despite them both being very clear about what they wanted and didn't want. Sasha also continually favored my daughter, including during my son's birthday, and fussed over her in ways that made her uncomfortable. And I still haven't forgiven the Little Mermaid thing. My daughter is a bit shy and it takes a while to open up to most people, so knowing her trust was broken as that angers me in ways I can't describe. To put it in simpler terms, my children aren't props, and whoever treats them as such will at the very least be put in time out. I called my father and Sasha on Saturday. I apologized for calling Sasha a creep, but told them that we needed some time apart. They won't see my family until my younger sister's birthday in late April. If that goes well, they'll be invited to my daughter's 5th birthday party in May. After that, we'll slowly work on re-establishing contact. I also said that if they overstepped our boundaries again, the consequences would be more dire. My father didn't take it well, I don't care. Sasha sent me a text with more apologies, followed by a request to at least FaceTime my kids every now and then. I said no, and to those who said my controlling behavior ruined the trip, my kids had an amazing time at Disney World. They're both still talking about it. My daughter keeps asking us to put her pictures with the characters she met up on the wall, and my son says he had the best birthday ever. I think that's it. Thank you for your advice and support on my first post. User Canny1Moon said, "You protected your children, and that's the best thing you can do in any situation. I'm glad they're still talking about the trip, despite favoritism and the Ursula animatronic, which means you and your husband managed to outshine all of that with wonderful memories. For the possible reconciliation, everyone can act normal for a day, especially if they know there's a goalpost on that day. It's the behavior over time that counts. If they're still messaging you, requesting FaceTime calls, and calling you unreasonable despite you clearly saying you want NC, you could begin a tally, 1 point for each request, and when it's X amount of points, they'll have their timeout extended because they obviously don't understand boundaries yet." Under this comment, OP said, "That's great advice. We don't want to go NC, but we will if our boundaries are disrespected. Knowing my father, a tally wouldn't be well received. I'm doing my best to avoid turning this into a bigger fight, but that kind of system would probably make things worse. It might be worth a shot though. I'll talk to my husband about it." User BIrony88 said, "Ask your daughter how Sasha makes her feel. If she expresses discomfort, you know what you need to do." A bit of a story time. When I was 8, my parents divorced. Shortly after, my dad took me to visit his mother in Florida, the first time I'd seen her since my literal birth. She arranged a trip to Disney World for us, my first and only trip there. Somehow, Dad met up with an old girlfriend of his at his mom's. I have no idea how, because as far as I know, he had never lived in Florida himself. She invited herself into our vacation. The woman made my 8-year-old self supremely uncomfortable. She tried to insert herself into my life as a replacement mother, bad-mouthed my own mom, and tried to convince me she didn't love me and that she herself should be my new mom, even sleeping with me on the pull-out couch, which really freaked me out. My dad didn't realize any of this. He was so clueless, and I didn't know how to tell him what was happening. This was supposed to be my bonding time with my grandmother, and this strange woman was ruining it. She went with us to Disney World, and she tainted that trip in much the way Sasha tainted yours. She was so overbearing and made everything about the relationship between her and me. I didn't really get to enjoy much of that day. There were even a few times when I was so overwhelmed I broke down in tears, like your daughter. The excuse was that I was afraid of the rides that she pressured me into going on, but her behavior contributed to my meltdowns, as did my sleepless nights with that woman on the couch. My experience is not identical to yours, but I hope it offered a child's perspective of such a situation. Your daughter may not like all of the attention Sasha was giving her, but may not be able to articulate it or may be afraid to. Sit her down and talk to her about it. Tell her it's okay to tell you anything and ask her how the experience made her feel. Under this comment, OP said the following: "Thank you for sharing that. It's always been clear that my daughter was uncomfortable with Sasha's behavior, which is why we made so many efforts to reinforce our boundaries. Timid or not, she was very vocal about what she wanted, be it our company, not Sasha's, or specific rides and souvenirs. In spite of that, I know we didn't shelter our daughter from everything. She's only 4, so I know the situation was a lot for her to process, and she can't articulate her feelings as well as her brother can. But she's not looking forward to seeing Sasha anytime soon, and I intend to respect that." About 2 months later, we got another update from OP. Last time I posted here, I mentioned that my father and Sasha wouldn't see my children until my younger sister's birthday. The party took place last weekend, and we didn't attend. These 2 months of NC worked fine, but not great. My father respected my wishes to my surprise, but Sasha kept trying to find ways to talk to my children. She'd call me under the guise of needing to ask me something, only to later say, "By the way, are the kids around? I want to say hi." Every time she tried that, I'd remind her of what I told her back in March. This must have happened almost a dozen times, which was enough for my husband and me to start debating on skipping the party. After speaking to our kids, we decided not to go. They both said they missed my father, but clearly didn't want to see Sasha. We thought about attending and just distancing them from her while there, but risking making our children uncomfortable wasn't worth it. My son even asked if we could see their aunt somewhere else without Sasha around. My husband and I explained the situation to my sister. She was upset, but mostly because she hadn't seen the kids in a while. We all went to dinner at her favorite restaurant the day after her party. I also called my father and told him we wouldn't go to the birthday party. He reacted better than I expected, but we still had a short fight about it. He claimed that I had promised we'd let Sasha see the kids after 2 months, called me unfair, and said he was entitled to have a relationship with his grandchildren. I immediately denied that. Though I tried to sugarcoat it at first, I eventually gave him the truth. My kids don't want to see his wife, and I won't force them to. My father and I had a long talk. I told him how much Sasha's actions at the Disney trip upset my children, as well as how uncomfortable my husband and I felt. I admitted I don't trust his wife at all, and I don't think I ever truly will. He said that while he still thought I was overreacting, he understood I wanted to protect my kids. My dad also told me about how these 2 months of NC were for them. Apparently, Sasha started talking about my kids, mostly my daughter, a lot more than usual. She'd mention things and places she thought they would like. My father was aware of one of the times she called me, but thought it was a one-time thing. She wanted to give my daughter a gift at my sister's birthday party. He said he didn't know why. At one point, she told him she wanted to plan another family vacation with the kids, even though I told them they're not traveling with Sasha anymore. Learning all of that just made me more certain that I can't trust this woman around my children. For now, I intend to remain LC with my father and NC with Sasha. My daughter told me she wanted her grandpa at her birthday party a few weeks from now, so I told him that he was invited, but Sasha wasn't. He agreed. To be honest, I don't trust my father after all of this. I'm allowing him to come because that party will take place at my home, which is easier for me to control. If he tries to bring Sasha, they'll both be kicked out, and it will take a long time for me to consider letting him near my kids again. My father hasn't told me how his wife is reacting to this. My sister told me that during her party, Sasha asked her to tell me she wanted to talk. I'm not reaching out to her, nor do I plan to respond if she attempts to contact me. Both my husband and I have blocked her. My children are doing great. They still talk about how much fun they had at Disney. My daughter's been saving money, putting coins in her piggy bank, so we can go back. On a completely different note, I'm pregnant again. This was completely unplanned. I always said I wanted 2 kids at most, and the third would have to be a huge accident. But my husband and I are ecstatic. I'm still in the first trimester, so not a lot of people know. We're brainstorming ways to tell our kids. Overall, I'm happy with my life right now, and as much as I wish this Sasha situation had never happened, I feel like a better parent after dealing with it. I have never been more confident in my abilities to protect my children than I am now. I don't think I'll update again anytime soon. Once again, thank you for all the support you've given me. I wish you the best. User Dalton402 said, I'll get the worst part out of the way first. Your dad was always going to support his wife. However, God, you did the right thing. What Sasha is doing is major overcompensating for something. If she treated all your kids the same, it would be one thing, but her fixation on your daughter is creepy. I don't think you should have apologized for it. I wonder if there is some trauma in Sasha's life involving a daughter that she hasn't admitted to. Under this comment, OP said, if there is any trauma, I can sympathize with her, but I can't let her use my daughter as a therapy pet. I hate to admit it, but I agree, my father's always going to support her. I really hope this attempt at LC with him works. User Lazuli said, sorry, but I think Sasha is a creep. I'm sure you already plan to do this, but I would keep my exact due date secret so Sasha and Pop don't show up at the hospital. Don't tell anyone but whoever is going to watch your 2 little ones that you are in labor, or at least make sure they won't slip up and tell Sasha. User Wheat said, I don't think it is trauma that is the driving force behind Sasha's actions. You mentioned Sasha wondered what it was like to have a daughter despite saying she is child-free. It is not unusual for men and women in their 30s and older to start to revisit thoughts of parenthood, even if they chose to be child-free, adopted their kid out, had abortions, and so on. Some have accepted the way things are, or simply have thought about it but do not desire parenthood or kids, but some do latch onto the child of another to experience what it is like. I think that is where Sasha is at. She has taken a liking to pretending to be a parent. It is kind of like a play to her that she is hooked on, and your daughter is her favorite dolly to fulfill her fantasy through. Of course, only the fun parts, shopping, dressing up, taking pics together, and so forth, not the actual parent experience. That wouldn't be as bad if it wasn't for her lack of boundaries. Respecting the actual parents and kids, it is all about what she wants, and her favoritism. You're doing well by taking your kids into consideration and keeping someone who is not respecting you, your husband, or your children at bay. To this, OP said, I don't think she's latched onto my daughter. She's latched onto the idea of who my daughter should be. She either ignores or doesn't know who my kid actually is. User Rue Harbor said, I'm so glad you're sticking to your guns on the boundaries. Sasha seems to have an unhealthy obsession with your daughter, which I would think justifies calling her a creep, to be honest. I get that one can gravitate more naturally towards one child in the family, be it nieces, nephews, grandchildren, or own children. Maybe they remind the person of themselves, or maybe they have more in common. But as an adult, you have to make a conscious effort to treat them all with the same amount of interest and enthusiasm. What Sasha is doing is anything but. After reading your posts, I'm just left thinking Sasha needs therapy, and that if I were you, I'd tell my kids' schools that Sasha is never to come pick them up, etc. Because her obsession seems to go on with a life force of its own, regardless of how much you guys distance yourselves. Especially with her bizarre phone calls and how your dad describes her constantly talking about your daughter in the NC period, and how she seems to not take in the information about vacation boundaries. That gave me some major ick. The final post from OP was made just 7 days ago. First of all, my father didn't bring Sasha to my daughter's birthday party back in May. I didn't really think he would. I had made it very clear I wouldn't tolerate that, but I'd be lying if I said your comments didn't make me a little paranoid. Secondly, I've just entered my 3rd trimester and the baby will be here in November. The kids are ecstatic. I'm having another girl, but my husband and I are not sharing the sex until she's born. This has nothing to do with our families, it's just something we've also done with our first 2. Everyone, including Sasha, knows I'm pregnant. We announced it a couple of months ago. I had no problem with my father telling her, though he did ask if he could. I didn't hear much about her reaction, but according to my father, she was happy for me. My children still don't want to see Sasha, and I'm still not forcing them to. I've unblocked her and put her on mute instead, but she hasn't made any attempts to contact me. We've continued meeting my father without his wife, and I think it's been working out. My relationship with him isn't fantastic, but it's much better than it was earlier this year. Last week, I saw Sasha for the first time in months. My cousin threw a party at her place. My husband and I attended, as did my father and Sasha. I knew she'd be there, but since the kids weren't with us, son had a sleepover, daughter stayed with my mom, I didn't really have anything against seeing her. They arrived sometime after we did. My husband and I spoke with them for a few minutes, and it was less awkward than I expected. Sasha asked me about the baby again, and I told her we weren't telling anyone, which again is what we've always done. About 20 minutes later, my father told me they had to go. I thought it was weird that they were leaving so soon, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He called me a few days ago, and we spoke for a long time. My father is difficult to talk to, so the following is what I gathered from the conversation. He said they left early because Sasha was holding back tears after she saw me. She was sobbing by the time they got to the car. They later had a discussion about it, and Sasha admitted she wanted kids. She married my dad knowing he didn't, but hoped he would change his mind. Apparently, when my son was born, Sasha tried to drop "I want one" hints to my father. He didn't notice it, so she gave up. According to my father, Sasha told him she loved my kids equally, but my daughter was special because she always imagined herself as a girl mom. That's also the reason why she became such a suffocating presence when my daughter was a baby. When my husband and I started setting boundaries, Sasha realized that she was overstepping and agreed to abide by them. To her credit, I think she did a mostly okay job back then, but the favoritism was still obvious enough that my son noticed it. The trip we took was a turning point because Sasha's dream of having a daughter included taking her to Disney World and having her do all the things she liked to do there when she was young. She told my father that having my daughter there was so exciting that she forgot everything I'd said about not overstepping. Sasha wanted a mother-daughter trip and tried to use my child for it. Sasha said she regretted her actions during the Disney trip, but only because she lost access to my children due to them. And seeing me at the party all pregnant and pretty, my father's words, not sure she actually said that, was what drove her over the edge. I remember reading some comments theorizing that this was what was going on, but I still didn't really expect this. My father said he was telling me all this because his wife wasn't doing well and he'd understand if I wanted to keep my kids away from her. Didn't expect that either. I don't know what the future of their relationship will be, and I don't think my father does either. All I know is that if Sasha still wants to have kids, it almost definitely will not be with my father. Before all this, I was pondering about my third child's future in relation to Sasha. Now, I sincerely don't want her to be a part of my baby's life. This isn't a final decision, but I've been speaking to my husband about it and he agrees with me. I don't think she's a bad person. I got some baby stealer comments on my previous update, but I don't think that's what's happening here either. But if the Disney trip proved anything to me, it's that Sasha is willing to be extremely selfish and disrespectful to get what she wants, even when my kids are involved. A couple of months ago, my husband and I had a conversation with our son about the subject. He told us he dislikes Sasha for 2 reasons. She favors his sister and she doesn't listen to them. Honestly, that's all I need to know. Looking back at my own childhood, I feel like I was never allowed to have boundaries. I was always expected to put my schedules and preferences aside for others. It's important to me that my children don't go through that. If they don't want to see Sasha, they don't have to. I think that's all I want to say here. I'm doing well, my kids are thriving, and I'm excited to meet my third baby. Again, thank you guys. User OpenIncident3601 said, "Your dad is certainly not telling you the extent of how far off the deep end she has gone, but it's enough that he gently told you that you are doing the right thing, keeping your kids away from her because she isn't well. I guarantee he's had to listen to some crazy things at home, and he believes you that she's obsessed with your daughter, and now you're getting a second daughter. She's going to struggle even worse if she thinks you are getting the daughters she deserves." User Messy Posting said, "Hopefully, Sasha's biological clock has timed out. Her behavior, including wanting children at 40-something with a 60-something-year-old man, has proven she would not make a good mother. If she had a baby with your father, that child would most likely lose its father before or during college. It would be dealing with an aging, retiree mother in her 20s. Who would want to subject a child to a lifetime of the hurt caused by losing your parents early or seeing them decline into old age? She is incredibly selfish and immature." Under this comment, OP said, "To be exact here, Sasha is 47 years old. I don't know about her fertility, but if she had a child with my father, she would almost certainly raise it mostly alone. She doesn't work, but my father still does because he wants to, and his job involves traveling a lot. Plus, I love the guy, but he's always had the tendency of getting lazy when he's home, which naturally got worse with age. And again, he doesn't want to raise more kids. Financially speaking, they're more than okay, but I can't imagine raising a toddler in my 50s. User Defiant Strength 6774 said, "Do you know if the way Sasha is behaving is because of issues in her life or childhood trauma with affection and boundaries, or she's keeping some secrets within? If so, has she tried to get help in counseling or therapy? Maybe there is more to it, but I'm probably stretching it. I'm so glad you're able to have such amazing communication with your kids. I feel I can't ever have that type of conversation with parents due to their belief, where they think they're mostly always in the right. I'm glad this changes for a lot of people. Congrats on your third born. Hope she is healthy. Blessings." To this, OP commented the following: "This whole explanation about her wanting a daughter made a lot of sense to me. I don't know if that's all there is to it, but I really don't care much. I have trauma with boundaries as well. I'm in therapy, but I haven't worked through everything, and I'd never deliberately make someone uncomfortable over it, least of all someone else's kids. I agree it's important to communicate with your children. My daughter was very obviously uncomfortable with Sasha's behavior during the trip. There were instances of her overstepping I haven't even mentioned here. And my daughter is a shy kid, so the fact that she was audibly protesting most of Sasha's actions was impossible to ignore. I've spoken with both my kids about how that behavior made them feel, which is how my husband and I made the decision to distance them from Sasha.